At this time, good afternoon, all of you. At this time, we're gonna call our work session for the Edgefield County Council Planning Commission to order for August 8th, 2024. Think we're in order now, I guess, speakers, we go down to old business. Instead of here, we got final review prior to our public hearing and vote on. We got review, change to the county comprehensive plan, the county land use map, proposal rural agriculture zone, then the county overlay district, and also the county ordinance for changes to the overlay district. Turn it over to whosoever.
In front of you, you'll see prepared the zoning map as well as your land use map. Everything that was discussed last month, he has created on these land use maps to mirror what you guys have suggested that you want to propose to county council. You're welcome to, I can put it on the screen too if you'd like to look at it. You're welcome to go up and look at it. We discussed where it would end. What was it, Ransford Road on Sweetwater. Mm-hmm. So he took what your suggestions and he just implemented on that map for the coverage. The changes that were discussed as far as the land use map, what was discussed last month is mirrored there on that land use map. That's what you will be proposing to county council. Do y'all have any suggestions? Changed your mind? Anything else? Got any more feedback from anybody? I mean, since last time we met? All good? Okay.
So just to reiterate, this also includes a packet that includes all the other comp plan updates previously discussed. Mm-hmm. That most of y'all have already voted on. I'll be sending the comp plan as a single item to council. So I imagine that'll be a 3 readings and done update, and we'll be finished with that for another 5 years.
Your changes are on page 6.
And then
you can view
the zoning map will give them, and they can tackle that however they want to, whether they want to do it all at one time, cut it into 5 pieces, however they want to go about it. But we will give it to them as a single, this is the idea. How do y'all want to implement it kind of thing? But if y'all are good with everything that we've previously discussed over the last few months, then y'all can move on to new business.
Y'all good? No questions?
Any questions, comments?
The only other thing that I really had, and I wanted just to throw out there at you guys, was possibly looking at tree preservation. I'm not talking about going nuts with it. I'm talking about just having an ordinance that indicated the preservation of either trophy or they call them grand trees. They're over a certain diameter, a certain species, and things like that. Not only in the highway corridor, but anywhere when we're dealing with a commercial and as well as neighborhoods, major subdivisions. We're not going to get into, my suggestion would not be get into residential preservation and things like that. But anything commercial, industrial, or within reason, you may have to look different at industrial, but definitely commercial, whether it's large scale or a smaller scale retail, just some tree preservation.
Aren't the tree preservation, a lot of it mentioned in the comp plan?
Well, that's what I'm talking about. I want to take that and expand that to the entire county. Because if we got something that comes somewhere that's not in the highway corridor, then I'd like to include some kind of tree, like I said, just for trophy trees and certain kind of trees that we would have some kind of tree preservation or replacement for. I'd like to see that go also in, I know, in subdivisions, and one of the ones that is Governor's Landing. I would like to take some of that and also implement some not just green spaces just being grass. Take and have the tree preservation in their green spaces there as well, and also have a requirement for trees there.
That's landscaping.
Correct. I would like to do both. I would like to have the landscaping, but I would like to also implement in subdivision the tree preservation in major subdivisions, not just small individual residential lots. And y'all can give your feedback with that as well.
And hand in hand with that is the option to create a mass grading ordinance. I'm sure y'all know that it's very popular for larger developers to simply go onto a piece of land, flatten it till it's perfectly flat, because it makes it much easier to build houses on. Most places around here have not managed to successfully implement a mass grading plan. North Augusta has tried several times and not gotten it approved. Where I have seen it successful are usually jurisdictions like, Hilton Head, places like that. And it's a simple no mass grading period. It's not you can do it in 3-stage lifts, you can do it, 30 acres at a time. Their rule is a flat, no mass grading period, done. I think if you put a strong tree preservation ordinance in place, it almost necessitates that you put some form of mass grading ordinance in place. The reason I say this is, let's say they go in and they identify 20 significant trees. Well, if you allow mass grading, then you also have to put some way in the tree preservation ordinance for them to remove those trees and then replant those exact same number of inches of trees. This is the way a lot of cities do it. And I won't badmouth it. Over the course of years, it turns out nice. I mean, 20 years later, when those little trees grow up into big trees, it starts to look good again. But if the goal is to truly preserve existing trees, you almost have to prevent mass grading. Otherwise, you can't mass grade if there's a tree in the way.
We have to make sure you put specific species, because a lot of these subdivisions are planting trees that don't grow with 30, 40 foot, and that's max.
Yeah,
Right.
along
And-
with that, there will be a list of trees that are native
Exactly.
species that we would adopt from
Just keep
the
with the
A.
contour of the land for your subdivisions, so it looks natural and the trees that are already there stay
So I
there.
think you do have to make a few exceptions, like obviously if you have land that's, has to be, DHEC requires you to do a delineation on or something like that. Well, some grading is gonna be required. I'm just saying, you're gonna have to
People
create
live in
some kind of
both.
ordinance that says, hey, you can't flatten 180 acres. Sure, if you got 10 acres and DHEC says, hey, it's adjoining a wetland and you need to delineate that and you need to grade it, fine, delineate the 10 acres, but leave the rest of it as natural as you can. Obviously, you still have to allow for them to do grading for individual lots, but that's not mass grading.
Right.
But I don't see how you have a strong tree preservation ordinance while you allow mass grading. I don't think they work together.
Right. I agree with both of those, the mass grading and the tree preservation. Number one, we're seeing in other counties where they've allowed mass grading, they're having flooding issues in areas they never had flooding issues in before. And it may be adjoining property that's now getting flooded that wasn't flooded before. So I'd like to see that. Edgefield County is hilly, right? I mean, it's hard to find a flat lot around here. But that's the natural topography of our land. And if we allow mass grading, we could disrupt the natural creeks and streams and all the tributaries that feed into the larger, like Stevens Creek and Savannah River, and create flooding issues for the people of Edgefield County that we could have prevented.
Yes.
If
And
we
it is-
didn't do
it is
mass
also
grading.
Important to remember that Shaw's Creek and Stevens Creek are our primary water sources. I mean, it's where we get our water. We pump off of that to supply Edgefield County Water and Sewer Authority, and all of Augusta uses it, Stevens Creek. So the Stevens Creek watershed is significant, and Aiken County is almost entirely dependent on the Shaw Creek watershed. So those two watersheds are very important. They both do have environmental protections in place, but erosion obviously is always a concern when you get sediment going into a watershed. But one of the big key things with tree preservation is the goal is not to save the pine trees. That's not the goal. The goal is to find significant trees that are native to the area that don't commonly get replanted. Magnolia trees, for an example. They grow well here. This is their natural place, but once they get cut down, they're just cut down. Nobody replants them. They don't get replanted. They have no monetary value, basically. And then even if you put a landscaping ordinance in place, a lot of times developers are just going to go to the bargain bin at whatever tree store they can find, and those are the trees they're going to buy. It doesn't matter if they're native trees or not native trees. They don't care. They're just trying to get the right canopy that we require. So I think it's important to say, hey, look, these are the significant trees to South Carolina. These are the trees we want you to save and not cut down in the first place. And then if you have to remove them, let's say you cut down 16 inches of magnolia tree, you got to put 16 inches worth of magnolia back on the property. I think that's the only real way to achieve true tree preservation.
Mm-hmm.
And I think with the taking of trees, you also have to limit it to a percent. You can't just let them, well, we want to put a house where all of these trees are. No, you can take 10%, 20%, whatever you want to set that to, and then y'all have to work around the other ones. So pick the 20% that are most in the way and work around the rest. It does create a design issue for them, but that's, that's just the way the business works. I'm sorry. But that's the only way you can actually achieve the objective. And then with the mass grading, like I said, you can't mass grade if you're going to save significant trees. It's
Right.
just not possible.
Is it possible that they could have kind of like a buffer zone for the neighborhood itself? And that the trees that are within a certain amount, so that the back of the property is left, and then in between the lots, trees that are there be left?
So
And
yeah, I mean,
That you would have an established yard instead of those little 3-foot trees, they put one
So,
in the front, one in the
well,
back.
I will say that most of the time on rear property lines for major developments, if there's a buffer yard requirement, they already leave it natural simply because it's easier to not have to replant it. The front buffers get removed because they want to bring their heavy equipment in.
But I'm just saying, like, maybe make it so that,
I think if you
Each
do a
house.
tree preservation,
yeah,
you make sure that all significant trees and all buffers and green spaces are mandatorily left untouched, period. So if you've got any space that's not going to be built on that has a significant tree, you automatically make that untouchable,
Mm-hmm.
period.
Mm-hmm.
And then I would give the option, let's say you give a 20% option to remove significant trees, and then they have to replant those number of inches in new trees. It's fine if you want to allow them to plant those in green spaces and in buffer yards, but I think to make a subdivision look really good, you have to have some spaced out in yards. The only caveat with that is once it turns from developer-owned to privately owned by a individual person, that takes our control out. So you need to make sure you get the right number of significant trees in the, well, I don't want to call it public space, but green space or conserved areas, common areas. Otherwise, a homeowner could say, you know what, I don't want a magnolia tree in my backyard. They cut it down, and now the subdivision is no longer in compliance. And you don't really want to do that. But one thing you can do is require green space. We already required 30%. You can say, hey, look, that 30% has to be spread out throughout the subdivision and not just in one spot. And then that way you can ensure that some of those plantings are in common spaces throughout the subdivision. The other consideration that I have with landscaping requirements is it almost will necessitate a irrigation requirement. That gets kind of complicated. I don't know if y'all want to dive that deep. You would think it's common sense that a developer would know, hey, if I plant new trees, I have to irrigate them to keep them alive. This is not true. They will plant it, they will let it die, and then they will move on and not worry about it ever again. On our commercial properties, in our current landscaping on the highway overlay district, of course, I go check those trees. If they're dying, I make them replant them. And that's not just then, that's, you know, take, what's the name of it? The Frito-Lay, for example. I let them know, because they put temporary irrigation in. I let them know. Even when Frito-Lay takes over from the developer and owns it, if I see a dead tree, I'm gonna make you replace it, or I'm gonna put a stop work order on your job site. You're not gonna be able to come to work. So they've left that irrigation in place so far, and hopefully they'll come back and put a drip system or something in. But the point being, we almost need to write something, hey, you know, until the trees are established, you have to have some sort of plan in place to irrigate the trees and take care of their needs. I'm not a professional when it comes to arboring, but there's also things that I've seen in other developments, like they don't take the sack off the root ball, they just plant it straight into the ground, then it gets root bound and can't grow. There's all sorts of problems that when you start getting into landscaping ordinances, you kind of have to consider. So my recommendation is what we can do is we can gather some examples from other jurisdictions who've had successful landscaping ordinances or tree preservation ordinances, and we can kind of just sit down one day and see, you know, why did they do this? What was the reason? And try to come up with, you know, a best case scenario for us. Obviously, we don't want to get, you know, to the point of Hilton Head. I mean, we're not trying to, you know, get that far where every time they build something, we're out there with a measuring tape going, no, that's only 1.5 inches wide. That's not enough. You know, we don't want to go that far, but I agree with her. We do need to start protecting the bigger, grander trees in the county, especially those that don't ever get replanted. Otherwise, eventually, we'll end up with 506 acres of pine trees.
Right.
And no natural forest left.
See, they destroying all the oaks, and see, it take 50 or 60 years for an oak tree to get right, you know. And, you know, the old sites, and they go in, some of the company, people are leaving them up, but once you can't replace it, you forget it.
And I mean, I understand that
Doesn't make
logging is big money in Edgefield County. I'm not trying to harass that in some way, but at the same time, if you don't do something to try and protect natural forests, it'll cease to exist at some point. And that is one of the beautiful things about Edgefield County, in my opinion, is our natural forests.
And so you did mention putting in that ordinance, that if they replant, that they plant native species of trees, native to Edgefield County, or, you know, the
Well,
Piedmont.
to the PD region.
Yeah, the PD region. I agree with that because, you know, one of the problems we saw with the Bradford pears that were so popular is they're sterilizing natural tree species. And so we're losing some of our natural trees because of the Bradford pear.
Just so y'all know, in case y'all didn't know, Clemson actually has a program where they will pay you to remove your Bradford pear and replace the tree with a native species for you. They will actually give you the tree
Had
to
I known
replace it.
before we put ours, yeah.
I don't know, you couldn't give me any more. They ruin your property, they ruined my property. I put
And they
years
stink.
ago.
And there are plenty of flowering trees that are not invasive like the
They
Bradford.
smell like dead fish when they bloom.
Oh, I got 1,000 of them in my yard.
And I don't have anything
So
against
you have-
ornamental trees, but I don't think we can let them be counted towards our significant trees. So if you cut down 30 inches of magnolia, you need to put 30 inches of magnolia back. You don't have to do it in one tree, obviously, because transplanting a 100-foot tall magnolia tree would be quite the job, but, you know, 2 15-foot magnolia trees is, you know, you just need to replant the equivalent. But we can't say, oh, we're going to cut down these magnolia trees or these cypress trees or whatever they are, and then we're gonna go back and plant, you know, dogwoods or whatever.
On a tree plan, you know what the biggest mistake is? You need to bare root your trees. Bare root them.
Do what?
Bare root,
root.
plant bare root them, and they live 99% more than the other way, and longer too. You bare root, okay, if you get a tree, bare root them, and I know that from experience. You know, you got the balls and all on them, but you bare root them, and they will grow. You got to water them a little bit before, but after that, you don't need irrigation, they'll go.
Well,
I don't
yes,
know why, but they will.
That's what I'm saying. A lot of them that leave the cloth sack on the bottom of
You
the,
need bare root.
on the tree planting,
Shake the ground.
the tree's almost guaranteed, I mean, it's almost guaranteed to root bound, which will kill the tree at some point. I mean, it'll still grow for years, but eventually
It will die.
It can't, the roots aren't quite strong enough to just bust the whole bag out. They'll tell you, well, it'll rot. Well, the tree will rot before that bag will. So I don't buy that. Most of the arborists I've ever talked to says that doesn't work. You need to cut the bag, you need to bust the root ball, and then you need to plant the tree. But like I said, I'm not a professional on that. That's what I've heard. So I think that those sorts of considerations have to be made in a tree preservation ordinance. So I think that'll be what April intends to work on next, is putting together tree preservation, landscaping, mass grading. I have no idea how we're gonna handle the mass grading yet. I don't know how you do it without simply saying no. So I'm gonna have to pull, you know, from other jurisdictions that have mass grading ordinances and see how they do it in a way that's less impactful than just, no, don't do it. It might turn out that there is no successful way to do it other than to say no. And if that's the case, then that's the decision y'all have to make. But I just don't see how you have one without the other.
Right.
I just don't see how it works.
Mm-hmm.
You know, in a subdivision, I know they'll cry because they're losing lots, they say, you know, but in your subdivision, for example, and I'm not for all this association and all that, but still, one impact on that, so like you take Savannah Lake, how many of you ever been? A place like Savannah Lake over there? The land, they don't grade mass grade. You grade only where your house going. You know, they
Right.
got, and you build with the contour and leave out, and it just look,
In
and
my
I know it,
opinion,
they
you
say
get
it
a better
costly, but
product.
that's
Right.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and
Buffalo
you-
Creek
you-
and all those
You know,
places.
all the companies that they build slab houses, whatever. Well, you can do an elevated slab. It's not that hard. We have the
Yeah, that's
technology.
right.
We've had it for a long time. I don't accept those sorts of excuses. There's no reason you can't build a foundation wall and backfill it.
And see, on your lot, you only grade the lot when the house is getting ready to build, according to the house. You don't go in there, just clean the whole thing. And they like that in Greenwood, and I see places in Greenwood, they're doing the same thing too, and it just, you know this mass grading, you got your contours still there.
Yeah, because
And-
that at I-20 and exit 1, where they're clearing that out. I mean, it's the townhouses, it's not us, but they have literally flattened that. There's no natural lay of the land there, period. And there's not a tree left.
Yes, and that's what I was
Mhm.
getting at before you came in. There's no way to preserve the natural trees if you're just gonna let them mass grade.
Mm-mm.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, those two things can't work together.
And you can't tell
'Cause
me
you're
at
either
some
gonna
point those
expose
houses
the
aren't
roots
gonna
of the
settle.
tree, which then the tree dies, or you're gonna bury the tree and then the tree dies.
How do you
So-
do it as far as they're built on a clear cut? There is no trees.
Well,
Like
then
where she's
there-
talking about,
there
that
are no
was-
significant trees, so, I mean, if you
Mhm.
take an old timber tract, for example,
That's
well,
what I'm like-
we're not trying to save pine trees.
That's what I'm saying, is there gonna be anything that you still gotta put in, at least hardwoods?
So that's part of the landscaping requirements. That's when you come in and say, hey, look, this is an old timber tract. We cut down, 300 acres of pine trees and we're gonna do a subdivision. Okay, fine, but now you're gonna have to come up with a landscaping plan and you're gonna have to plant so many significant trees. The goal there being, you don't get a right over Bettis Academy's I-20 exit. I mean, you've seen that over there. You don't get an ocean of houses as far as the eye can see without a tree in sight. That's the goal, to avoid that. A lot of our local developers, they plant trees, and after 10, 15 years, the developments start to look good. They don't really look bad anymore. But, tract builders don't have that mentality. They're bottom dollar people, which is their business model. I'm not going to be mad at them about it, but at the same time, if we want to do something about it, we got to regulate it.
Would this affect individuals, just like a subdivision? Say
So-
they had a 5-acre lot, that I think would, if I'm following you correctly, is that what kind of you're asking? If it says, if they buy 5 acres and
So
it's clear
there
cut,
are options
is
there.
an individual gonna have to do the
You
same?
can apply it to anything that would be legally defined as a major subdivision. You can,
I think
apply it to
I
anything
think what
that
they're
would
wanting to
be
apply it to
land
is just
development.
tracks though.
Okay,
But you can also apply it countywide, and all that would mean is that if they have a significant oak tree on the property, they need to build away from it. They can still cut down the pine, the scrub, the, sweet gums and whatever else that we don't care about. They just need to leave that tree. And most of the time, I don't think people mind having a tree in their yard.
How do you preserve the roots of that tree?
You won't, so
Well,
if they build within
That
its,
depends on how far away they build the house from it.
See, some of the roots go a long way.
Again, I'm not an
Roots go as
arborist,
far as
but
the
from what
limbs
I
reach.
understand,
as
you
far
should
as the-
expect
Don't
the
go
root
further than
span
that.
to be equal.
But
to
but that's
the
where the kill
canopy.
point is.
Mhm.
So
So that would have to be included.
you would not want to build your house under the canopy of the tree, but I don't think your insurance company's gonna let you do that anyway. My insurance company doesn't even like the trees I already got in my yard,
Mine don't either.
but I told them those trees were there a long time before my house, so they get to stay. Cause I have 600+ foot tall oak trees in my yard, and then I have 3 hickory trees and 2 maple trees, and they're silver maples. They're beautiful, and I'm not cutting them. Sorry.
So residentially, this would apply to major subdivisions and PDs.
So that's up to y'all.
Okay.
Y'all could apply it countywide, or you could say, hey, look, it applies to PDs, major subdivisions, and land development, so commercial.
I don't
Y'all
think it should
can-
go on
y'all can-
residential.
Y'all can
Right.
set that as
Telling people they can't cut a tree in their yard.
as
You'll have a
strict
mess.
or as not strict as you want. You
Right.
don't have to apply it to minor subdivisions. In fact,
So
you
we-
can write it as countywide with the exception of minor subdivisions, if that's what you want.
Or private residential.
Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, if they're,
That would be a minor subdivision. So if you come in and say, hey, I'm gonna cut out 2.5 acres to build my house on, that's not a major subdivision. That's a minor subdivision. We don't really police that until you get a building permit, and then we police the building side of it, but that's about it.
If you make it countywide though, what would it do as far as the farmers wanting to extend their farm for ag?
So agriculture is,
If you
It's
make it
kinda
countywide,
protected. We
they
don't
can't
really-
clear it.
we don't require ag to make land development applications at this current time.
That's what I'm
so we
saying though,
don't-
but if you implement that tree thing countywide, would it affect them?
Only if they had to apply for some sort of development permit. So it would not, let's say they wanted to clear off some land to plant more peach trees, whatever. Unless they require some sort of land development from us, it would not kick in. Now, if they're doing something like Sarah's Farm Adventure, something like that, then yes, obviously, it would then apply to that. But then you get into, well, they can ask for a variance and they can come before the board and say, hey, look, I know y'all's tree preservation is required here, but what we want to do is literally impossible if we don't do X, Y, Z. And then y'all can case by case hear them out. And of course, you can just simply exempt agriculture.
Yeah.
You can simply say it does not apply to agricultural purposes. It does not apply to minor subdivisions. I mean, you can specify what it applies to.
Yeah, because you're gonna get into, if it's agriculture, if they want to extend a pasture, if they want to
Mhm.
clear a fence line.
Yeah.
You know, if you've got trees growing in a fence
And,
line or something,
I
you,
mean, logistically speaking, you can even further define large subdivision. I mean, you can say, okay, it's a major subdivision, but it's only 7 lots. Well, you can set it to say, hey, these tree preservation and landscaping requirements only apply to developments of 10 lots or more. I mean, you can set those boundaries kind of wherever you want to. I don't think there's any state law that prevents you from doing that.
What's the number of lots for major subdivisions right now?
Anything more than 5,
More than 5, okay.
right? Or is it 5 or more?
5 or more, or you create a road,
So it's 5 or more. So if you got 5 lots, it's major.
if they're not exempt.
What makes them exempt?
So the state law states any lot that does not create a road and is 5 acres or larger in size is an exempt lot, which means our regulations don't apply to it at all, no matter what we write, so. But we don't have anything that hits lots. We don't have any lot type requirements that are greater than 5 acres, so, I mean, that's not usually an issue for us.
So, so it would still be, let's say someone wants to take a parcel, split into 4 lots, so it's still considered minor unless a road has to be cut in?
Correct. So if they had enough acreage to cut out 4 lots that were already on an existing road,
Mm-hmm.
that's a minor subdivision. All you have to do is make a plat, and it has to meet our, 1-in-5 ratio requirement, and then it's good automatically.
Can they do it with a private drive?
So the thing with a private drive is you can only have 2 911 addresses issued on a private drive. So if you had 4 lots, you would have to have enough road frontage to have 2 private drives, because you would need to have 2 addresses on each of them. That's what usually prevents that. We've actually had developers who have come in and put in a private drive and then come back a year later and tried to split 2 more lots off of it and split 2 more lots off of it. It doesn't take us long to catch up with that because of the 911 system. When she goes to drop the point, it says, oh, that's a 3rd one. It needs to be a road. We go, hold on. When was this last divided? And we look it up and we're like, nope, you're trying to make a major subdivision now. So. And yeah, they get mad about that, but it is what it is. And now there are situations where we have had in the past, with a weird flag lot or something like that, where it had a 3rd address coming in and it needed to be named. We don't usually bring that to the planning commission because it's an existing lot. They're not actually splitting out a new lot. They just need that driveway to have a 50-foot easement and a name so they can get that 3rd address. If that's the only reason it needs to become a named road, we will allow you to create a private road and name it without going through the planning commission. But if you're trying to divide lots and it's creating a road, it automatically has to come back through here.
When someone comes in and has to create a private road shared by multiple parcels, do y'all encourage them to write up a private road maintenance agreement? If they're required to write up okay.
Yes. So you have to provide us with a signed private road maintenance agreement, and every property owner with access to that road has to sign it, or we won't allow it.
That's good, because,
We've run into that problem too
Yeah.
many times where so-and-so uses this road that I maintain to get to their property
Mhm.
and they're tearing it up and, you know, we've had that problem enough to where if you want a private road, fine, but all adjacent property owners have to agree.
yeah, I've run into that in real estate, because the banks, if they're gonna finance that property that's the end of a private road, they wanna see that private road maintenance agreement on file already. The
And-
lenders
and
are
we do.
requiring it.
We make them record it.
That's good.
So they have to bring it to us with a recording stamp, and then we
Mhm.
put it in that road file. Obviously, it's private road, so no maintenance ever gets done on it, but we do file it as a private road, and we keep that road maintenance agreement on file.
That's good, because lenders are requiring that when they're financing one of those parcels.
Yeah, we started doing that, what, 3, 4 years ago? Because we kept running into that exact issue where
Mm-hmm.
we were getting complaints and nothing really we can do because, you know, we can't expend public funds on private property, so it becomes a land dispute basically between two private property owners
Mhm.
and causes a lot of conflict. So we stopped allowing it altogether, and you have to have that agreement in place before we'll name the road.
Good.
We also had the problem with people trying to come in, they have a 20-foot easement and they want to make it a private road. And that was, so we changed the rules there too. You got a 50-foot wide one now, and 20-foot riding surface. And we put some regulations in place to try to prevent that kind of thing from happening in the future. We'll see how that works out.
Anything else? Anybody have anything?
Yeah, I did have a couple more things.
Okay.
The list I'll send you that you can go ahead and look over will actually come from the American Landscaping and National Landscaping Association. It's not going to be something we're just going to have to. It'll have native species. It'll be kind of mirror other counties and cities around us. So it'll be any trees on this list, canopy or what are they called? Understory trees. They will be native species to around here, and they will grow well here. And you can look over that list. If there's some that, if you think it's too long, you want to simplify it, you can do that. But it will come from that American Nursery and Landscaping Association. Also, I would like for y'all, if y'all would be interested in entertaining the thought for some commercial entryway landscaping, not only in the overlay districts, but anytime a commercial business comes in, because if you just go down Sweetwater Road, the buffers you guys have established for those overlays, you can see Frito-Lay,
Mhm.
and then you can see the, I guess
Beacon
it's a truck
overhead door.
repair right beside it.
Mhm.
If you'll pull, I just wanted to show you some examples.
Yeah, it has no buffering.
There's no buffer. It looks drastically different.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see.
But are they grandfathered in?
Should be
Is
on
that truck lot grandfathered in where
Yeah,
we can't, we
Yeah,
can't
we can't go back on
force
that
them to
one.
do that?
Have all of those
It should be on that drive.
Tell me where to go.
Right here. Right. Right here, entryway. See if that's it.
Hold on. That's. what
There
I
we
was
go.
thinking.
Okay, if you're going down Sweetwater Road and you have, whether it's whatever scale commercial, or for instance these gas tankers, just the implementation of these buffers makes a huge difference. Keep on scrolling. I mean, you've got the trees, you got it set back at this point versus keep scrolling down. this is an entryway. And then back to the entryway requirements to any kind of commercial. Keep on going. Keep going. Versus something like this. This is the entry to one of the gas tankers. If you keep on going down, you'll see more. This is what you see when you pass if we don't have a buffer. Things like this, maybe scale. We could go by a scale of how large the commercial is or the intent or what the use is. I think if we look at open storage, I think we should require a more dense buffer, maybe a 4. And that would give you more screening. Right now in our overlay district, we actually have for large-scale retail, which is kind of backwards to me. For the large-scale retail, it's an evergreen, a consistent evergreen buffer along the whole. You're not going to be able to see it, which that next picture would be that last one. That would be what you would see if we had a grocery store coming. To me, those type of requirements would kind of go back to what you would see with the gas tankers or the open storage. And my suggestion would be to actually change that. If it's a large retail, we would allow what's in front of the Frito-Lay corn chip, maybe a type 3 or a type 2, a landscaping and buffering. But for a major, for a large scale retail, you wouldn't require this consistent buffer.
Where can you find information on, like you just said, a type 2 or type 3 buffer?
It's
Or,
all in our
So
ordinances.
it's in our ordinance.
it is in the
under
ordinance,
buffer
okay.
yard.
I've looked at some of that. All right.
Yeah, and our buffer yard ordinance already has some,
Is there a contingency on that evergreen? Because evergreens constantly get diseases and die. Once they die, are they replacing or is it just dying out and
That could
opening
be
up?
something else that you write when you're
and
writing
me
your
personally, I would
landscaping.
prefer something other than the evergreens.
Me
personally.
personally too. I like the way Dazzle did theirs, the landscaping place up the road from it.
Yeah, absolutely.
left all
That's
the
something
hardwoods.
again, when you come up, I mean, you can have pages of these things from all the way from your trees to your evergreen that you require. You can have a list of things that, if there's certain species that you don't think are attractive, that are they are more prone to diseases that you want to exclude, we can do that. But I do, like on the pictures, think that we should take that buffer requirement and move it out and expand it to the whole county instead of just our overlay district. Anytime you have, just because Frito-Lay corn chip happened to come on Sweetwater Road, we would still want that buffer. It's more attractive. You have that greenery in front of it. It's not just a metal building that you're passing. You're adding some of that greenery, you're adding some of that rural there, and I definitely would like to see some entryway landscaping requirements. Again, you would go back to the Nursery and Landscaping Association to require them to have proper irrigation and proper maintenance of it, and just expand that throughout the county instead of just our overlays, because if it happens to come and it's just not on one of the corridors, we don't have anything to say, hey, we want, this landscaping here, we want this buffer here, we want this entryway to look like this.
And that would just be for commercial, industrial, and major subdivisions, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so not an individual landowner
No.
that has a large tract, okay.
And when we come up with a tree preservation, we can make a list of significant trees, understory trees, shrubs. These are the specific species that we want to see. And then we can make that a table and we can apply it to our buffer yard requirements too. So that when they go in and have a required buffer yard, they can't just plant, whatever, they have to plant from those lists.
And if you'll bring up another one, and one other thing, also along with the commercial parking lot, if you'll go out of that one, it's another file. Let's see. maybe it's the first one. In parking lots, have, I can bring that next time. Just, it's examples of incorporating trees, islands in our parking lots. Having so many trees and so, in those, for every so many spaces, like for every 10 spaces, you need to have an island with trees like this.
Look for those with the shade.
Scroll up,
I know.
let's see.
Try to park in the shade under those.
So are you just gonna go ahead and write these up for us for next time?
I'm gonna send these to you. Keep going down. Keep going down. I had several of them. Keep going down. I mean, you can go from one extreme to the next. You don't have, to this right here. I think of KJ's in the parking lot. If you had these islands implemented, you could add more greenery and we can't do that now with KJ's, but going forward, say we do happen to get another grocery store, we would have these entryway on either side, landscaping requirements, and then we would have the islands and the tree requirements in the actual parking lot to add a little more greenery to it. Like I said, you can do as little or as much as you feel appropriate. And those are my suggestions.
So you're gonna write them up for us? And
Yes,
we'll-
I can send you what I have.
Okay.
I will send you that ANLA list with the trees. You can start glancing over it. And you can start thinking about, maybe the landscaping requirements for the entryways, maybe possibly in our corridors, expanding or making denser the buffer requirements for things that have open storage, like the truck repair right there next to Frito-Lay, something like that with open storage, we would require a denser buffer. Just things like that I'm just throwing out there for y'all to think about, and we can, continue to discuss them.
My only comment is that tree preservation, mass grading, landscaping, it can get complicated. So don't expect it to be a fast one and done. This might be something y'all need to work on for a significant period of time to really get what you want and what we need. I don't see any reason why it would be opposed, politically speaking. So I just think that we need to make sure that, we're not gonna try to become the tree police, but at the same time have some protections in place to keep some greenery and keep that flat housing development ocean from happening.
We went to a meeting, I think it was in Aiken, and one of the counties said they didn't have these things in place, and it got away from them. And then when you try to go and backtrack, it's like, well, the parking lot's already there. You're not going to dig it up and make them, plant trees. Once the damage is done, and we've seen that things won't go here. It just won't, nothing will go here. They're not going to sell that land, and they wind up doing it. So I think it's better to be prepared. Like I said, you don't have to go overboard. You can get as intense into it as you want to, or as lax with it as you want to. Just have it really simple, and just
Something's
have those
better than nothing.
have those in place.
Sometimes.
Because it just, to me, when I keep harping on the Frito-Lay and then the gas, the truck place.
Yeah.
It's just so different.
It is the
And-
stark
and-
contrast side by side. Yeah.
Yes, and we're required that now, and it just makes a big difference. I just think it preserves the beauty of our county. And those are things, and I will send you all of these things, and we'll make you I'll give you it on file. I'll send it to you digitally, but also make you a working folder. As we're discussing these, you can continue to make notes and suggestions, and we'll put updates in it, and we'll pick through it and pick through our ordinances, and make changes like things. Make a small requirement for green space. You have to have 5% trees in your green space. Just something, 10% trees. And you don't want to. If you don't want to go nuts with it, you can be, like I said, as lax or as strict with it as you want to be.
April, in in your research, have you seen where, they maybe have like a square, I'm talking a parking lot?
Mhm.
There has to be so many square feet before you implement that? Because I know in the city of North Augusta at one time, I think it was actually the church, I think it was First Baptist downtown. They were gonna pave a grass lot that they'd been using for years as a parking lot, decided to pave it. And the city said, well, you have to have green space and trees, and they ended up losing almost half the parking spaces
And you can set
for that. So I was wondering if you had that in the literature. Do we know what square footage is a good
No,
number
what I
where we
have
can
seen-
say if it's this or smaller, you don't have to
Mhm.
take up 30% for green space on the
You can
parking lot?
absolutely write that. I mean, we
Okay.
could come up with something reasonable. I can go back and see if any other, North Augusta or Aiken County has those type. What I've seen is per parking space, you have, for every 10, you have an island or a diamond that you can have a tree planted in. But we can also absolutely look at that because you don't want, especially at a church, they've got a small space that they need to pave. You don't want to say, well, you've got to take up 50% of it with trees. That's kind of defeating the whole
Right.
purpose for them.
For it to be logical where you've got, a business that's really small and has a small parking lot,
Right.
you don't want to take up a third or half of their parking space for greenery because it's so small, it's not going to be an impact.
Right, and you can do
One way or the
things
other.
under a certain amount of square footage. You could only require maybe one or two at a certain point, or you can require none at all. So we can look at that and you can make a decision, what you feel is
Yeah.
appropriate.
So in the highway overlay district, now this only applies to major retail, so it doesn't apply to everything. But just to give you an idea, it's 10 or more parking spaces that are paved with concrete or asphalt. You gotta have a it's part of your plan that you have to landscape it and show a landscaping plan that includes it.
If it's more than 10 parking spaces.
Less than 10 parking spaces, you wouldn't even have to include it in your plan, basically. So, but if it's over 10, then you have to include that in your site plan and show it. And then, of course, you get down here and it actually tells you what you have to have and their design standards and all that kind of stuff.
And that's again for large scale retail.
Yeah.
You can
That's
totally
40,000
Okay.
square foot or larger, so that's,
Okay.
Walmart level stuff.
Okay. Because I'd hate to take parking spaces from a small business, that has a small lot anyway,
And again, going back to actually in this overlay for large scale retail, that continuous buffer kind of, I think maybe we should back off of that, maybe change that to, require a certain, maybe a type 2 or type 4, the same that we required of Frito Lake
But
Woodchip.
and I'll say this about, there's no bad ideas with this. I'm fairly familiar with all the state laws of planning, landscaping, tree preservation, they're not discussed. So I don't think we're gonna run into any kind of legal issues with, you have to exempt certain types of businesses or anything like that. I don't think there's any of that in the state law. So if you have an idea, just share it, and, when we do our legal review, if there's a problem, we'll catch it and we'll bring it back to the table. But off the top of my head, I can't think of anything that would conflict with anything you might want to do, so.
But again, what we have for large scale retail, I see more appropriate for open storage or other types of uses other than large scale retail, because that could make us possibly lose an investor. Somebody wanted to invest in Edgefield County, to me, and they see our requirements. You got to totally screen this grocery store with a buffer. They want people to see. They want
Right.
that that visual for them. And so we don't want to detour anybody because everybody's hollering we need another grocery store, and we do. We could use another grocery store, especially towards Johnston. But I absolutely feel like we should, beauty is in the eye of the beholder, but certain things with open storage really should be screened.
Everybody likes green.
That's right.
Y'all finish? Take a 5-minute
That's,
break.
that's pretty much it for this meeting.
Meeting adjourned. We take about a 7-minute break. We'll start up next meeting. Betty? Okay. This time, we're going to call the Edgefield County Planning Commission regular meeting to order for August 8th, 2024. Lisa's gonna give out an invocation. After that, we'll stand for our pledge of allegiance.
Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for allowing us to join here tonight. Thank you for the rain that we received, even the abundance of it. Lord, we thank you for the safety that you've provided for us all tonight. Lord, thank you for letting us come. May we have a good meeting and do what's right for this county. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Amen. Just stand, face the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Two. I need a motion for approval of the August 8th meeting agenda.
Make a motion.
Second.
Second, all in favor, raise your right hand. Opposed, ayes have it. Approval for the minutes of July 11, 2024 work session meeting.
So moved.
Second. Motion second, all in favor, right hand. Need a motion for approval of July 11, 24
Make a
meeting
motion.
minutes.
So moved.
Second.
Motion second, all in favor, right hand. Right. No guest speakers. So after that, we have our public hearing. This portion of the Planning Commission regular meeting allowed for comments from the citizens regarding public hearing items on the agenda during the regular meeting. Citizens may sign it, we already signed if you want to speak on these matters. You may sign up to speak on this list maintained by the county planner prior to the meeting. Each citizen should be eligible to speak for a maximum of 5 minutes, remaining on the subject at hand. All citizens wishing to speak during the public hearing should be subject to recognition by the presiding officer and address the presiding officer directly by coming up to the front to the mic. In the written comments, you can send them to the county planner. Should have been there already for it to be read tonight. We have 4 items. Change to the county comprehensive plan, zoning map changes for a proposal to the rural agriculture zone, the expansion of the county overlay district, and change to requirements in overlay districts. So when you come forward, you might want to make whatever one you related to.
Nobody actually signed the public hearing, so does nobody want to speak?
Nobody want to pick all mine here?
I just want to make sure sometimes people sign wrong.
Okay. So if all parties and all minds are clear, then we will proceed further to our next item on the agenda, which is a report by the staff on land development application approval for the month of July. What you have?
Stuck it in there in case you didn't see the one for the last time. July, we had 3 exempt. We had 8 plat reviews, and we had 2 minor subdivisions for last month. And of course, we had the Women in Unity that was approved last month. That's all that I have.
Do you recall what those minor subdivisions were?
What the minor ones were as far as the acreage count,
Yeah, or what,
they were under 5 acres.
they were under 5 acres.
One would be under 5 acres.
And what was the purpose?
We don't ask why they, I mean.
Or so were they
I mean,
splitting the
we
parcel?
can't really ask.
I was
It's one
just
of
curious.
It's one of those things that they can literally say, yeah, it's none of your business what I'm doing, and we can't really, you know, it's minor, so under the law, they just have the right to do it, but I can show you where they're at. Let's see, what's the,
Yeah, I could look them up. Now, I was just curious. I didn't know if,
well, most of the
it was-
time with minor subdivisions, it's a family member cutting out a piece of land for a son, grandson, something like that, or it's for tax purposes where they're cutting out a piece of land from a large tract that they're keeping ag, you know, things of that
So
nature.
they can build a house.
That's typically the reason you see minor subs. most of the time, minor subdivisions are not for sale of land profit. Occasionally, we'll see them, with like timber companies. They'll acquire a piece of another property and tie them together, but usually those become exempt because they're buying 500 acres, 600 acres, that kind of thing.
Thank you.
Any more questions, comments on that? This time we go to old business. We're gonna do our final discussion and vote regarding the following. And, we're gonna do all these in 4 different votes.
So there's
All
two
right.
different ways you can do it. If you have any amendments that you want to make to any one item, then we'll do it item by item, and then you can make your amendment for that item. However, if you're good with all of them as discussed to this point, you can just make a motion to approve all 4 at one time and then vote on it all together. That's up to y'all's discretion.
As far as that little piece they want covered.
So I'll make
Add
that
it in.
change, that between here and when it gets to council, and I'll let council know that I made, 2 parcel adjustment in there at the request of the homeowners. And that won't be an issue. Y'all don't need to worry about that. I'll deal with that before it gets to council.
So, all and put them all together. Okay, so we're gonna so what we got here, we got change to the county comprehensive plan. We got change to the county land use map. And we got expansion of the county overlay district. And we got also requirements in overlay districts. So if you will entertain me a motion to cover all 4.
Actually, can I amend that just a little
Okay.
bit?
Okay.
Let's make a motion to modify the county's comprehensive plan, land development ordinances, and zoning. And that's all you have to say, and then vote on that, and that will include everything,
Okay.
everything in there.
Someone give me a motion.
Okay, I make a motion to modify the ordinances, zoning,
In the comp
and
plan.
comprehensive plan.
Second.
Motion second, end of discussion. Any discussion? No discussion, all in favor of voting to it, and we send it to the county council. All in favor, right hand, opposers, ayes have it, so we'll send it up to them and they'll take it from here. All righty, thank you, appreciate that. In new business. New business, no new business. All quiet, no exec session, no problem. Don't have any comment, but I appreciate your full turnout tonight. You taking your precious time to come and spend it here. So, all is well as far as, I just had one comment that, not pertaining to this, but I did receive a email from a horse rescue crew out of Aiken for request to come before the planning commission, but we're not in that business. It's something that's compared to some horses that the county had, sheriff department had released to them, and they didn't get paid for it later on. So this really concerned us, and I didn't know. I think they just sent it to me, but they wanted to appear before the planning commission, but
Yeah.
it was just,
I mean-
it really would have been out of order.
Yeah,
It's not
if
pertaining to
they're
us,
not
right.
getting anywhere directly with the sheriff on an item like that,
We don't
then
wanna
they
get
should
into
talk
that.
to David or maybe go to a county council meeting. But the planning commission doesn't deal with county finance or animal control, so that, you're right, that would not be
But that's,
appropriate to come to.
But I'm gonna just dealing with it, but I just, a few later on the table, I just thought I'd let you know in case you did get one, though, just disregard it. Okay, if not, anything else, we'll give me a motion.
Make a motion, we adjourn.
Second.
All in favor of Johnny? Right hand. Meeting adjourned. Appreciate the public coming. Thank you.